He thought he was untouchable. $6 billion, a corporate empire, the power to crush anyone beneath him without consequence. When Thaddeus Mercer publicly humiliated and fired a waitress over a water spill at his business dinner, it was just another display of power. What he failed to see was the cold calculation in her eyes as she walked away. She never raised her voice, never threatened revenge. She simply went home, opened a locked case hidden beneath her floorboards, and began the systematic destruction of everything he had built. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoy stories of justice served, consider subscribing for new uploads every week. The evening air hummed with elegance at Orem, Chicago's most exclusive dining establishment, as Leocadie Rousseau adjusted her crisp black uniform in the staff locker room. At 38, her movements possessed a fluid economy that none of her coworkers could quite place. Efficient, precise, nothing wasted. The restaurant wouldn't open for another hour, but Leocadie always arrived early, a habit formed long before her time as a server. She tucked a stray strand of auburn hair into her neat bun and checked her reflection in the small mirror inside her locker door. Behind the mirror, partially concealed, was a photograph she never displayed but couldn't bring herself to leave at home. As she closed the locker, another server, Daria, rushed in. "Chef Marchand is on a rampage about the Dover sole," Daria warned. Apparently, the shipment came in half-thawed. Leocadie nodded, her expression unreadable. "I will adjust the special speech accordingly." "How do you always stay so calm?" Daria asked, hastily changing into her uniform. 5 years here, and I've never seen you rattled." The ghost of a smile touched Leocadie's lips. Perspective. The word hung in the air as she made her way to the main dining room, where crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables draped in white linen. The maitre d', Pascal, was reviewing the reservation list with unusual intensity. "Table 7 will need extra attention tonight," he said, his voice lowered. "Thaddeus Mercer." "The tech CEO," Leocadie stated rather than asked. Pascal nodded. "Neurasync, worth $6.2 billion, give or take a few $100 million depending on the market. He's bringing potential investors from Japan. Management wants everything perfect." "Everything is always perfect at Orem," Leocadie replied, her tone neutral, yet somehow carrying a hint of irony only she understood. By 7:30, the restaurant had filled with Chicago's elite, old money mingling with new tech, politicians with celebrities, all united by the exclusivity that Orem represented. Leocadie moved between tables like a shadow, anticipating needs before they were voiced, earning appreciative nods but rarely direct acknowledgement. At 8:15, Thaddeus Mercer arrived with his entourage, 4 executive types in expensive suits and 2 Japanese businessmen. Elliot Vance, the restaurant manager, personally escorted them to table 7, a prime spot with views of both the Chicago River and the restaurant's interior. "Your server this evening will be Leocadie," Elliot announced with practiced deference. "She is one of our finest." Thaddeus barely glanced at her as she approached. He was mid-sentence, discussing neural interface applications, his hands gesturing emphatically. At 52, he possessed the confident bearing of someone accustomed to commanding rooms. His tailored suit and meticulously groomed salt and pepper hair projected success and authority. "Good evening," Leocadie began, her accent barely detectable after years in the States. "Tonight, Chef Marchand has prepared several specials I would be honored to describe." "Just bring the wine list," Thaddeus cut her off, not bothering to look up. "The Chateau Margaux 2010, if you have it." "Of course, sir," Leocadie responded smoothly. "An excellent choice." As the evening progressed, Thaddeus grew increasingly difficult. The wine was served 2 degrees too warm. The lighting was excessive and distracting. The bread, clearly not baked this afternoon. Each criticism delivered loudly enough for neighboring tables to hear. Each one met with Leocadie's unflappable professionalism. The eldest Japanese guest, Takumi Hirano, seemed increasingly uncomfortable with Thaddeus's behavior, offering Leocadie subtle nods of acknowledgement whenever she approached. His eyes, observant and sharp despite his 61 years, followed her movements with the unusual interest. "The problem with service these days," Thaddeus announced to the table as Leocadie presented the main courses, "is that nobody understands excellence anymore. Standards have plummeted. I assure you, sir, at Orem we strive for perfection with every dish," Leocati replied. Thaddeus snorted. Perfection? Please. Your generation wouldn't recognize perfection if it slapped you in the face. The table fell awkwardly silent. One of the executives cleared his throat and attempted to change the subject, but Thaddeus was on a roll now, emboldened by expensive wine and the captive audience of people who depended on his goodwill. Tell me, he said, finally looking directly at Leocati, what exactly qualifies you to serve at a restaurant of this caliber? Honestly curious. Before she could answer, another server passing behind her chair bumped her arm. The water pitcher in Leocati's hand tilted, sending a small splash onto the white tablecloth. Nowhere near any guest, just a minor spill on the table itself. The reaction was immediate and disproportionate. Are you kidding me? Thaddeus bellowed, pushing his chair back. This is completely unacceptable. Do you have any idea what this dinner represents? Billions in potential investment, and you're splashing water around like a child? I apologize for the inconvenience, Leocati said, already efficiently blotting the spill. I will have the table linens replaced immediately. Do not bother, Thaddeus said, his voice dangerously quiet now. Get me your manager instead. The Japanese investors exchanged glances. Takumi Hirano's expression had hardened, though he remained silent. Within moments, Elliot Vance appeared at the table, his professional smile strained. Is there a problem, Mr. Mercer? Incompetence is the problem, Thaddeus said, gesturing toward Leocati. This level of service is unacceptable for an establishment that pretends to world-class status. Elliot's eyes darted between the powerful CEO and his employee. I assure you, sir, Leocati is one of our most experienced servers. If there was an accident, I'm not interested in excuses, Thaddeus interrupted. I want her removed from this floor immediately. In fact, if you value my continued patronage and the recommendation of my associates, you'll terminate her employment tonight. A heavy silence fell over the table. Elliot's face paled visibly. Sir, perhaps we could discuss this after your meal. I would be happy to have another server take over, and we can certainly comp your dinner this evening. That's not what I asked, Thaddeus said, voice ice cold now. Either she's gone, permanently, or I ensure everyone in my considerable circle knows that Aurum tolerates mediocrity. Your choice. Elliot looked at Leocati, apology and conflict evident in his eyes. Leocati, please come with me to the office. She nodded once, her face a careful mask. As they walked away, Takumi Hirano's eyes followed her. A flicker of recognition quickly concealed. In the cramped manager's office, Elliot paced in distress. I can't believe I'm doing this. Your record has been impeccable for 3 years. It's all right, Elliot, Leocati said quietly. No, it's not all right. But Mercer could destroy us with one social media post. The owner would have my head if I lost his business. Elliot ran a hand through his thinning hair. I have to terminate your employment, effective immediately. I'll provide an excellent reference, of course, and 2 weeks severance. I understand. Elliot blinked, surprised by her calm acceptance. You understand? Most people would be furious. A slight smile touched Leocati's lips, but didn't reach her eyes. I've faced worse. She collected her belongings from her locker, carefully removing the partially hidden photograph and slipping it into her bag before anyone could see it. As she walked through the kitchen toward the back exit, several co-workers offered sympathetic glances but kept their distance, aware of the career suicide of crossing Thaddeus Mercer. Outside in the cool night air, Leocati paused, looking up at the Chicago skyline. Her expression shifted, the carefully maintained server's mask falling away to reveal something much harder, much colder. For the first time that evening, her true self showed in her eyes, calculating, determined, dangerous. The modest apartment where Leocati lived belied her true nature. Located in a nondescript building in Uptown, it appeared unremarkable at first glance. Clean, minimal furnishings, nothing personal on display. But closer inspection would reveal subtle abnormalities. The triple locks on the door, the barely noticeable security sensors on the windows, the absence of social media photos or mementos. 3 days after her dismissal from Aurum, Leocati sat cross-legged on her living room floor, watching a news segment on her laptop. On screen, Thaddeus Mercer accepted a crystal trophy at a technology gala. Neurasync continues to revolutionize how humans interact with artificial intelligence. the reporter narrated over footage of Mercer shaking hands with political figures. With the upcoming merger with Quantum Dynamics expected to double the company's already staggering $6.2 billion valuation, CEO Thaddeus Mercer seems unstoppable. Leocady closed the laptop and stood, moving to a seemingly solid wall. She pressed an almost invisible seam, revealing a hidden panel that slid open noiselessly. Within the concealed space hung a military-grade laptop, several hard drives, and a metal case. She removed the case and carried it to her kitchen table. The case opened with her thumbprint, revealing contents that would have shocked anyone who knew her only as a restaurant server. Multiple passports with her photo, but different names, a set of military identification cards, specialized electronic equipment, and a small stack of heavily redacted documents. Beneath these lay 3 medals in velvet-lined recesses, 2 purple hearts, and a silver star. Leocady lifted one of the passports, opening it to the name Leocady Rousseau, Lieutenant Commander, United States Navy. She stared at it, memories washing over her. Her mind flashed to the underwater demolition, training in Coronado, holding her breath until her lungs burned, pushing past what ordinary humans could endure. Then to intelligence operations in 5 different countries, speaking 4 different languages, becoming whoever the mission required her to be. The most vivid memory came unbidden. Tehran, 7 years ago. Operation Nightshade. The extraction had gone wrong, 3 team members lost, her own injuries severe enough to end her field career. The faces of her fallen teammates appeared in her mind, clear as photographs. Shaking off the memories, Leocady returned to the hidden panel and removed the specialized laptop. Unlike her civilian computer, this one featured military-grade encryption and connection capabilities that would be illegal for most civilians to possess. She activated it using a complex authentication process, then began a methodical search. Over the next 48 hours, Leocady slept little. Her walls gradually filled with printed materials, corporate structure diagrams of Neurasync, lists of offshore accounts, security vulnerability assessments. She created a detailed map of Thaddeus Mercer's empire, identifying pressure points and weaknesses with the precision of someone planning a military operation. What emerged was damning. Neurasync's revolutionary neural interface technology had been fast-tracked through FDA approval through systematic bribery of officials. Clinical trials in developing countries had resulted in numerous undisclosed deaths and injuries. Corporate espionage against competitors appeared routine, with evidence suggesting blackmail of rival executives. Most concerning were the backdoor access points built into Neurasync's AI security systems, access points that connected to government databases, financial institutions, and military networks. What Mercer was selling as enhanced security was, in reality, the most sophisticated spying apparatus ever developed outside a government intelligence agency. Leocady's phone rang, interrupting her concentration. The caller ID showed unknown, but she answered anyway, knowing few people had this number. "It's been a while, Rousseau," said a deep voice she immediately recognized. "Admiral Everett," she replied, straightening instinctively despite being alone. "To what do I owe the honor?" "Your name flagged in our system. Multiple searches on Neurasync and Thaddeus Mercer in the past 72 hours. Care to explain why you're investigating one of our military contractors?" Leocady paused. Admiral Marcellus Everett had been her commanding officer during several classified operations. His current role overseeing naval intelligence meant very little escaped his notice. "Personal interest," she said finally. The Admiral hummed skeptically. "This wouldn't have anything to do with an incident at Orem Restaurant, would it? An establishment where you've been employed under light cover while recovering from your injuries? Sir, with respect, my employment choices post-service are my own business. Not when you're still technically on inactive reserve status, Lieutenant Commander, and not when you're using military intelligence resources to conduct what appears to be a personal vendetta." Leocady sighed. "It's more complicated than that." "It always is." A pause. "What did you find?" She hesitated only briefly before outlining her discoveries about Neurasync's security backdoors and their potential national security implications. The Admiral was silent for a long moment. "Continue your investigation. Document everything. But Rousseau, whatever you're planning, remember, you're still bound by your oath." I expect a full briefing before you take any action. Understood, sir. After the call ended, Leo Katie returned to her research with renewed purpose. On her screen, she pulled up footage of Thaddeus Mercer's upcoming press conference, scheduled to announce the merger that would cement his status as one of the most powerful figures in technology. Her expression hardened as she began typing, initiating a complex sequence that would grant her access to Neurasync's most protected systems. The first phase of her operation was about to begin. The 64th floor of Neurasync Tower offered panoramic views of Chicago's skyline, though Thaddeus Mercer rarely spared them a glance these days. Success had rendered such spectacles commonplace. This morning, he strode into the executive conference room with the confident air of a man accustomed to adulation, nodding perfunctorily at the board members and executives who rose at his entrance. "Good morning," he announced, not waiting for responses. "Today marks the beginning of a new era for Neurasync. In exactly 1 week, our merger with Quantum Dynamics becomes official, and our valuation will exceed $12 billion. Approving murmurs circled the room as Thaddeus gestured for his assistant to distribute folders containing the merger documents. He had just launched into his presentation when the conference room door opened abruptly. Oriana Blackwood, Neurasync's head of cybersecurity, entered with an urgency that immediately disrupted the room's atmosphere. At 35, she was notably younger than most of Thaddeus's executive team, her position earned through brilliance rather than connections. Her expression now betrayed unusual concern. "Mr. Mercer, I apologize for the interruption, but we have a situation requiring immediate attention." Thaddeus barely concealed his annoyance. "Can it wait? We're discussing the future of the company." "Sir, we've detected unusual activity in our secure systems. Someone is accessing encrypted files through authorized channels, but in patterns we can't explain." "That's why we pay you, Oriana," Thaddeus replied dismissively. "Handle it and report back after the meeting. I have a merger to complete." Oriana hesitated, then nodded curtly. "Of course, sir." She withdrew from the room, her posture rigid with professional frustration. Thaddeus turned back to the board members with a practiced smile. "Now, let's continue with the financial projections for Q3. As you can see on page 4, our neural interface patents alone are valued at—" He stopped mid-sentence as the large display screen behind him flickered. The financial graph disappeared, replaced momentarily by what appeared to be an internal memo, one marked Confidential Trial Results, Modification Protocol. It displayed for only 3 seconds before reverting to the financial projections, but the damage was done. Several board members exchanged concerned glances. "Technical glitch," Thaddeus said smoothly, though a muscle twitched near his eye. "Now, regarding our projected earnings—" A chorus of notification sounds interrupted him as every phone in the room seemed to chime simultaneously. Board members reached for their devices, expressions morphing from curiosity to concern as they read identical messages from unknown numbers, containing links to offshore account details, accounts connected directly to Neurasync's regulatory approval process. "What is happening?" demanded Vivian Chen, the eldest board member. "Thaddeus, are these authentic company documents?" Before he could answer, his own phone rang. Seeing Oriana's name, he excused himself and stepped into the adjoining office. "What the hell is going on?" he hissed into the phone. "Someone's inside our systems," Oriana replied, her voice tense. "Using executive credentials, they're selectively releasing information to specific recipients, board members, partners, even journalists. We're trying to lock them out, but they seem to anticipate our every countermeasure. Find them," Thaddeus ordered. "Whatever it takes. I want this contained before the merger announcement." He ended the call and returned to the boardroom, where the atmosphere had shifted from celebratory to tense. With forced confidence, he addressed their concerns, dismissing the documents as forgeries from competitors trying to sabotage our merger. Most seemed willing to accept this explanation, if only temporarily. As the meeting disbanded, Thaddeus retreated to his corner office, instructing his assistant to hold all calls except from the cybersecurity team. Behind closed doors, his composed facade crumbled. Whatever was happening threatened everything he'd built, everything he was about to achieve. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. Across town, in the penthouse suite of the Peninsula Chicago, Takumi Hirano reviewed the encrypted files that had appeared on his secure server an hour earlier. Unlike the board members who had received only fragments of information, Takumi's files were comprehensive, detailed evidence of Neurasync's systematic fraud, bribery, and security vulnerabilities. He studied the documents with the practiced eye of someone accustomed to evaluating intelligence. The patterns were familiar, methodical exposure designed to create maximum impact with minimum collateral damage. Military precision. Takumi's mind flashed back to an international security briefing 3 years earlier. A classified presentation on elite American intelligence operatives whose identities were protected even in retirement. One face in particular had struck him, a woman whose record included underwater demolition expertise, cryptologic warfare achievements, and multiple commendations for operations in Asia. The same woman who had served his table at Orem, who had been publicly humiliated and fired by Thaddeus Mercer. Reaching for his phone, Takumi dialed a secure number. When the call connected, he spoke in rapid Japanese, his voice low, despite being alone in the suite. The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes. After hanging up, he walked to the window, gazing across the Chicago skyline toward the distinctive silhouette of Neurasync Tower. Fascinating, he murmured to himself. Absolutely fascinating. Back at Neurasync headquarters, chaos intensified throughout the day. By afternoon, the company's stock had dropped 17% on rumors of federal investigation. Partners were calling to express concern. Journalists were sending increasingly specific inquiries about clinical trials in Malaysia and executive communications with FDA officials. Oriana Blackwood had commandeered a conference room, transforming it into an emergency cybersecurity command center. Multiple screens displayed ongoing attempts to trace and contain the information leaks, all unsuccessful so far. "It's not a conventional hack," she explained to Thaddeus when he demanded updates. "Someone is using legitimate credentials. They're accessing systems they're authorized to use, just in ways we never anticipated." "Whose credentials?" Thaddeus demanded. "That's what's strange. The access points keep shifting between different executive accounts, including yours, sir. The system recognizes the user as legitimate each time." Thaddeus paled. "Lock it all down, revoke all access except mine and yours." "We tried that an hour ago," Oriana replied, frustration evident in her voice. "Somehow they still got through. It's as if they know our security architecture intimately, like they helped design it." As she spoke, another wave of releases hit the media. This time, private emails between Thaddeus and government officials responsible for approving neural interface technology appeared on technology news sites. Within minutes, Neurasync's stock plunged another 12%. Thaddeus slammed his fist on the table. "Find whoever is responsible. I want names. Use whatever resources necessary." By evening, the situation had deteriorated further. News vans gathered outside Neurasync Tower. The merger partners from Quantum Dynamics had issued a statement postponing the announcement pending clarification of recent allegations. The company's legal team was working frantically to prepare for what seemed inevitable: federal investigation. Alone in his office after most employees had gone home, Thaddeus stared at his computer screen in disbelief as his personal email dinged with a new message. The sender was anonymous, but the content froze his blood. A single image of water spilling on a white tablecloth at Orem restaurant. In her apartment, Leo Katie monitored the fallout with clinical detachment. Multiple screens displayed news coverage, stock tickers, internal Neurasync communications, and federal agency responses to the information she had strategically released. She had been careful, targeting only evidence of actual wrongdoing, ensuring innocent employees wouldn't suffer, focusing the exposure on those directly responsible for corruption. This wasn't about destroying a company. It was about justice and accountability. Her secure phone vibrated with an incoming call from Admiral Everett. "You've been busy," he said without preamble when she answered. "The situation warranted action," Leo Katie replied. "Neurasync's neural interface backdoors compromise national security. So, I've noticed from the evidence crossing my desk, the Pentagon is scrambling, intelligence committees are convening emergency sessions, and the FBI is preparing search warrants." The Admiral paused. "But we both know this isn't just about national security for you." Leo Katie remained silent. "The restaurant incident," he continued, "that was personal. The abuse of power is always personal, Admiral. For the victims." A heavy sigh came through the line. I've arranged a meeting with Mercer tomorrow. He doesn't know it yet, but federal agents will be joining us. I want you there. Is that an order? Would I need to make it one? She considered for a moment. No, sir, I'll be there. And Rousseau, try not to completely obliterate what's left of his company before morning. Some of those technologies, properly secured, could actually benefit national defense. After ending the call, Leocady returned to her workstation. The Admiral was right. This had become personal in a way she hadn't anticipated. Thaddeus Mercer's arrogance at the restaurant had triggered something dormant within her, a response to the same kind of dismissive authority that had cost her teammates their lives in Tehran when a commanding officer ignored their intelligence assessment. She had never sought recognition or acclaim for her service. The work itself, protecting others, upholding principles, had always been enough. But being treated as invisible, disposable, by someone who wielded power so carelessly, had awakened a determination to show that true strength lay in character, not position. The following morning broke with Neurasinc's crisis splashed across every major news outlet. The stock had plummeted 40% overnight as international investors pulled out en masse. Federal investigators were reportedly preparing to enter the building. Thaddeus Mercer, according to sources, had not left his office since the previous evening. At precisely 9 o'clock, Oriana Blackwood entered Thaddeus's office to find him disheveled and frantic, having clearly not slept. Sir, there's a Admiral Marcellus Everett here to see you. He says it's regarding national security implications of our neural interface technology. Military contract interest, now? Thaddeus straightened his tie, seeing a potential lifeline. Perhaps the Defense Department could salvage something from this disaster. Send him in. Admiral Everett entered with military posture and stern expression, his decorated naval career evident in both his bearing and the gravitas he brought to the room. At 68, he remained physically imposing, with steel-gray hair and piercing eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they observed. Mr. Mercer, he said, without offering his hand, we need to discuss the security vulnerabilities your company has built into systems currently deployed in sensitive government operations. Admiral, I assure you any vulnerabilities are unintentional and will be addressed immediately, Thaddeus replied, attempting to regain his usual confident demeanor. Neuracinc values our military partnerships above all else. Is that so? The Admiral's tone remained skeptical. Then perhaps you can explain why your neural interface systems contain backdoor access points that match exactly the pattern used by Chinese intelligence services? That's absurd. We would never— Sir, Oriana interrupted from the doorway. There are federal agents in the lobby with search warrants for our servers and executive files. Thaddeus sank into his chair, the facade of control finally crumbling completely. This is a coordinated attack on my company. Someone is trying to destroy everything I've built. Not someone, the Admiral corrected. One person. And not your company, just you. What are you talking about? Instead of answering directly, Admiral Everett pulled out his phone and sent a text message. Moments later, Thaddeus's office door opened again. Leocady Rousseau entered, dressed not in a server's uniform, but in a crisp navy blue suit that somehow emphasized her military bearing. Recognition dawned slowly in Thaddeus's eyes, followed quickly by confusion. You, he finally managed. The waitress? The Admiral's voice cut through the room with military precision. Allow me to properly introduce Lieutenant Commander Leocady Rousseau, Naval Intelligence, SEAL Team 6, Cryptologic Warfare Expert. 2 Purple Hearts, Silver Star recipient. Thaddeus stared in disbelief. 7 years ago, the Admiral continued, she led Operation Nightshade, rescued hostages from terrorist financiers with ties to your overseas partners. Since recovering from injuries sustained in that operation, she's been working undercover tracking international money laundering networks. Oriana Blackwood, standing frozen in the doorway, suddenly made the connection. She's the one who breached our systems. That's how she knew all our protocols. Not breached, Leocady corrected, her first words since entering. Your security architecture has fundamental flaws that create vulnerabilities. I simply demonstrated them. The Admiral nodded. Lieutenant Commander Rousseau identified critical security risks in your neural interface technology, risks that could compromise military operations and intelligence assets worldwide. This is about the restaurant? Thaddeus asked incredulously. You destroyed a $6 billion company because I fired you from a serving job? No, Leocady replied calmly. I expose criminal activities and security vulnerabilities because they threaten national interests. Your behavior at the restaurant simply brought you to my attention. The office door opened again, and Takumi Hirano entered, accompanied by two individuals in suits who discreetly displayed federal credentials. Mr. Mercer, Takumi said formally. I should properly introduce myself as well. I'm not merely an investor. I represent the International Financial Intelligence Task Force. We've been tracking money laundering operations connected to neural technology for 18 months. Thaddeus looked from Takumi to Leocady to the Admiral, comprehension and horror dawning simultaneously. This was coordinated, all of it. Justice often is, the Admiral replied. At that moment, Thaddeus's phone chimed with a news alert. The headline read, Neurasync partners withdraw from merger amid federal investigation, stock in freefall. As federal agents began the formal process of serving warrants and securing evidence, Leocady watched Thaddeus with an expression not of triumph, but of solemn recognition. She had not sought vengeance, but accountability had found its target nonetheless. The man who had wielded his power so carelessly, who had humiliated her without a second thought, now faced the consequences of all his actions, not just those directed at her. In the reflection of the office windows, with Neurasync Tower's shadow stretching across Chicago below, justice had assumed a shape neither of them had anticipated a week earlier at a restaurant table. The hastily organized press conference outside Neurasync Tower had all the hallmarks of damage control, corporate logos prominently displayed, a carefully positioned podium, and anxious public relations staff hovering at the edges. But the atmosphere told a different story. Journalists exchanged knowing glances, investors whispered urgently into phones, and security personnel scanned the gathering crowd with obvious tension. Thaddeus Mercer emerged from the building's revolving doors precisely at noon, his usual commanding presence diminished by the events of the past 48 hours. His tailored suit still projected wealth and authority, but his face betrayed the strain of a man watching his empire crumble in real time. Behind him walked two attorneys and a visibly uncomfortable Oriana Blackwood. Good afternoon, Thaddeus began, his voice slightly less resonant than his usual public speaking tone. I've called this press conference to address the allegations against Neurasync and to assure our investors, partners, and customers that we remain committed to innovation and integrity. As camera shutters clicked and reporters leaned forward expectantly, Thaddeus launched into a carefully crafted statement about misleading information and competitive sabotage. 3 minutes into his speech, heads turned as a black SUV with government plates pulled up to the building's entrance. Admiral Marcellus Everett stepped out, followed by two individuals in dark suits who positioned themselves at the edge of the gathered press. Thaddeus faltered mid-sentence, his eyes fixed on the Admiral's approach. As I was saying, Neurasync categorically denies any impropriety in our FDA approval process or our international operations. Mr. Mercer, Admiral Everett interrupted, his commanding voice carrying effortlessly across the space. We need to speak privately, now. Cameras swiveled to capture this unexpected development. Thaddeus, acutely aware of the optics, attempted to maintain control of the situation. Admiral Everett, I'm in the middle of an important statement to our stakeholders. Perhaps we could schedule— This isn't optional, the Admiral replied, stepping closer and lowering his voice. National security implications require immediate attention. The words national security rippled through the crowd of journalists, triggering a flurry of speculation. Thaddeus's attorneys exchanged alarmed glances before one stepped forward to whisper urgently in his ear. After a brief, tense moment, Thaddeus nodded stiffly. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize, but I must temporarily postpone this statement to address an urgent matter. My team will continue to answer your questions. As public relations staff scrambled to manage the chaotic scene, Thaddeus was escorted back into the building by Admiral Everett and the two agents. They bypassed the main elevators in favor of a private executive lift, riding in silence to the 64th floor. Once inside the boardroom, the Admiral motioned for the doors to be closed. What is the meaning of this? Thaddeus demanded once they were alone. You've just confirmed every conspiracy theory those reporters will publish tomorrow. Their theories aren't nearly as damaging as the truth, the Admiral replied evenly. And the truth is what we're here to discuss. Before Thaddeus could respond, the boardroom door opened again. Leocadi Rousseau entered, followed by Takumi Hirano. The sight of the former waitress in this sanctum of corporate power seemed to physically affect Thaddeus. His posture stiffened, his expression cycling quickly through shock, confusion, and dawning comprehension. "You," he said simply, his voice barely audible. Admiral Everett took control of the room, his military authority evident in every movement. "Mr. Mercer, I believe formal introductions are overdue. Lieutenant Commander Leocadi Rousseau, Naval Intelligence, SEAL Team 6, Cryptologic Warfare Expert, 2 Purple Hearts, Silver Star recipient." Thaddeus stared at Leocadi with new eyes, seeing for the first time the military bearing that had been there all along, camouflaged beneath a server's deferential posture. 7 years ago, the Admiral continued, she led Operation Nightshade, rescued hostages from terrorist financiers with ties to your overseas partners. "That operation was classified," Thaddeus interjected, his business instincts momentarily overriding his shock. "How does this concern Neurasync?" "Because your neural interface technology contains backdoor access points identical to those used by the terrorist network. Lieutenant Commander Rousseau's team dismantled," Takumi answered, stepping forward. "Access points that compromise international financial systems and military intelligence operations." The Admiral nodded to one of the agents who connected a laptop to the boardroom's display screen. Security footage appeared, showing Leocadi in her apartment, systematically accessing Neurasync's systems through vulnerabilities that should not have existed. "This isn't some random hack," the Admiral explained. "This is a demonstration of critical security failures in systems your company has already deployed in sensitive government operations." Thaddeus's face had gone pale. "Those systems were certified secure by independent auditors." "Auditors you bribed," Leocadi spoke for the first time, her voice calm but firm. "Just like the FDA officials who fast-tracked approval despite documented neural damage in test subjects." "These are baseless accusations." "Actually," Takumi interrupted, "they're extremely well-documented accusations, which brings me to my own introduction." He produced credentials from his jacket pocket. "Takumi Hirano, International Financial Intelligence Task Force. We've been tracking money laundering operations connected to neural technology for 18 months. Understanding dawned visibly on Thaddeus's face. "The investment dinner. You were never actually interested in investing." "On the contrary," Takumi replied with the ghost of a smile. "I was very interested in certain investments, particularly those flowing through shell companies in Singapore and Cyprus, connecting Neurasync to organizations under international sanctions." As this information landed, Oriana Blackwood knocked and entered the boardroom, her expression grim. "Sir, federal agents are securing our servers and have sealed the R&D department. They have warrants for financial records going back 5 years. Thaddeus seemed to physically deflate, sinking into the nearest chair. "This is because I fired you," he said to Leocadi, disbelief coloring his voice. "You destroyed a $6 billion company over a restaurant incident?" "No," Leocadi replied evenly. "Your company is being investigated because you built technologies that threaten national security and engaged in criminal activities to deploy them. The restaurant incident simply brought you to my attention." The Admiral stepped forward. "Lieutenant Commander Rousseau has been recovering from field injuries while assisting with financial intelligence operations. Her cover as a restaurant server was part of that assignment, until your actions compromised it. So this is revenge," Thaddeus concluded. "This is accountability," the Admiral corrected, "something you've apparently avoided for quite some time." At that moment, Thaddeus's phone chimed with a news alert. The headline read, "Neurasync partners withdraw from merger amid federal investigation, stock in freefall." The Admiral nodded to the agents who moved toward Thaddeus. "Mr. Mercer, these agents will escort you to federal offices for formal questioning. Your attorneys may accompany you." As Thaddeus was led from the room, he paused beside Leocadi. "I had no idea who you were," he said quietly. "That's the point," she replied. "You never bothered to see any of the people you considered beneath you." 2 days later, the federal building in downtown Chicago hummed with activity as Thaddeus Mercer surrendered himself to authorities after a negotiated agreement with prosecutors. Gone were the bespoke suit and commanding presence. Instead, He wore a more subdued outfit selected by his crisis management team, his expression that of a man confronting the unthinkable, the collapse of everything he had built. From across the street, Leo Katie observed the scene from inside a government vehicle, her face impassive as cameras captured Thaddeus's walk of shame. Beside her, Oriana Blackwood watched with a complex mix of emotions. "I still can't believe one person brought down the entire company," Oriana said, breaking the silence. "The company didn't have to fall," Leo Katie replied. "That was Mercer's choice. He built a culture where ethical corners were routinely cut, where security was compromised for profit, where people were disposable. The foundation was already cracked." Oriana nodded slowly. "I tried to warn him about the security vulnerabilities, multiple times. He always said we could patch them after the merger." "Some things can't be patched later," Leo Katie said. "Integrity is one of them." As they watched Thaddeus disappear into the building, Oriana turned to face Leo Katie directly. "You could have destroyed us all. Why target only him and the executives directly involved? Why protect the rest of us?" "Collateral damage isn't justice," Leo Katie replied simply. "His employees deserved better than him, and better than becoming casualties of his choices." Oriana considered this for a moment. "The board has asked me to lead the new compliance division, rebuild with actual security and ethics this time." She hesitated. "I could use someone with your expertise." A small smile touched Leo Katie's lips. "I already have a job, but I might be available as a consultant." That evening, Leo Katie returned to Aurum Restaurant, not as a server, but as a guest. Admiral Everett had insisted on dinner, calling it a debriefing, though they both recognized it as something more ceremonial. They were seated at a prime table near the windows where, just a week earlier, Thaddeus Mercer had held court. The staff moved with their usual precision around them, though Leo Katie noticed the subtle double takes as former colleagues recognized her in this new context. Midway through the appetizer course, Elliot Vance approached their table, his discomfort evident in every movement. "Commander Rousseau," he began, using her military title with awkward formality. "I wanted to personally apologize for what happened last week. If you had known I was military, intelligence, you would have treated me differently," Leo Katie finished for him. "That's precisely the problem, Elliot. I don't want your apology for how you treated me. I want you to remember that everyone who walks through your door deserves dignity, regardless of their uniform." Elliot nodded, chastened. "Yes, of course. You're absolutely right." After he retreated, Admiral Everett raised his water glass in a subtle toast. "Well said, Commander. Just speaking from experience, sir." As they continued their meal, Takumi Hirano joined their table, having just concluded meetings with federal prosecutors. "The case is expanding beyond Neurasync," he reported quietly. "Your intelligence has exposed connections to financial crimes across 3 continents." "The neural interface technology was just the tip of the iceberg," the Admiral agreed. "Mercer created the perfect infrastructure for money laundering and data theft, all hiding in plain sight as legitimate business." Leo Katie absorbed this information with professional detachment, though part of her still processed the events of the past week with something approaching disbelief. What had begun as a simple job, a cover while she recovered from field injuries, had evolved into one of the most significant counterintelligence operations of her career, all because a powerful man couldn't be bothered to treat a server with basic human respect. "What happens now?" she asked, looking between the Admiral and Takumi. "Mercer's assets have been frozen," Takumi replied. "He's facing decades in prison. The company is being restructured under new leadership. Your friend Oriana seems promising. And you, Commander," the Admiral added, "have a decision to make about your future." 6 months later, the Veteran Support Center on Chicago's South Side bustled with activity. In a computer lab equipped with donated technology, Leo Katie moved between workstations, guiding a diverse group of former service members through cybersecurity training. "Remember," she explained to a young woman struggling with encryption concepts, "security isn't just about complex passwords. It's about understanding how systems connect and where vulnerabilities emerge." The center had become Leo Katie's primary focus in recent months. Using a portion of the whistleblower reward from the Neurasync case, she had established a technology training program specifically designed for veterans transitioning to civilian careers. Today marked the completion of their first cohort certification process. As the session ended and veterans gathered their belongings, Admiral Everett appeared in the doorway. Leo Katie excused herself and joined him in the center's small courtyard. "The program seems to be thriving," he observed, nodding toward the departing students. "They just needed the right opportunity," Leo Katie replied. "Most employers don't recognize how military skills translate to civilian technology roles." "Speaking of roles," the Admiral said, "I've come with a formal offer. Naval Intelligence wants you back, Rousseau. Full reinstatement, promotion to commander, leading a new cybersecurity division. Your work on the Neurasync case demonstrated exactly the skills we need." Leo Katie was silent for a moment, considering the offer. "I'm honored, sir, but I've served in the shadows long enough. The country still needs people with your abilities." "And they'll have them," she assured him. "Just differently. These veterans, they understand sacrifice and service in ways most civilians never will. By teaching them, I multiply whatever contribution I could make alone." The Admiral studied her for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Your father would be proud. He always said you were the smartest Rousseau to ever wear the uniform." "He said that about all three of his children," Leo Katie replied with a small smile. "Because it was true about all three of you." The Admiral's expression softened slightly. "Will you at least consider consulting on certain operations? Your expertise is too valuable to lose entirely." "I'll consider it," she conceded, "but my priority remains here." Later that afternoon, Leo Katie drove to Rose Hill Cemetery, navigating the winding paths with the familiarity of regular visits. She parked near a quiet section and walked to a group of 3 headstones, each bearing the name Rousseau, each marked with military insignia. She knelt before the most recent grave, her brother, fallen in Afghanistan 5 years earlier, and placed a small stone atop the headstone, a tradition she maintained with each visit. Beside it lay her father's grave, a Navy SEAL from an earlier generation. The third belonged to her sister, lost in an intelligence operation that remained classified even to Leo Katie. From her pocket, she withdrew the Silver Star medal she had earned in Tehran, placing it temporarily on her brother's headstone. "Power isn't about how many people fear you," she said softly, echoing words their father had often repeated. "It's about carrying on when no one sees your battle." As afternoon light filtered through nearby trees, Leo Katie remained in quiet contemplation. The Neurasync case had brought unexpected public attention to her work, attention she had never sought during her military career. Yet it had also created this opportunity to help fellow veterans find their paths forward. In the distance, she could see new visitors entering the cemetery, a military funeral procession beginning to assemble. Leo Katie stood, brushed grass from her knees, and retrieved her medal. She watched as the honor guard assembled, their movements precise and dignified. For a moment, she allowed herself to remember Tehran, the operation that had ended her field career and claimed her teammates. The mission had succeeded, hostages rescued, terrorist network disrupted, but at devastating personal cost. Her physical recovery had been difficult, her psychological recovery ongoing. Perhaps that was why Thaddeus Mercer's casual cruelty had affected her so deeply. In that moment at Orem, she had once again been rendered invisible, her service and sacrifice dismissed by someone who measured human worth only in terms of immediate utility and status. As the funeral procession approached, Leo Katie stepped back from the path, offering a respectful distance. When the flag-draped coffin passed, she stood at attention, rendering a precise salute, not because anyone was watching, but because respect mattered, especially when no recognition was expected. The lesson Thaddeus Mercer had failed to learn throughout his rise to power was the one Leo Katie had been taught from childhood. True authority comes from character, not position. Real strength lies in how we treat those we encounter, not in what we can extract from them. Returning to her car, Leo Katie checked her phone to find a message from Takumi Hirano, now back in Tokyo. The international investigation sparked by the Neurasync case had expanded, uncovering financial crimes across multiple industries. His message was brief but meaningful. "Your work continues to make waves. Lives saved. Thank you." She smiled slightly. This was why she had joined Naval Intelligence, not for recognition or power, but to protect those who would never know her name or the battles fought on their behalf. The Veteran Support Center would be hosting a graduation ceremony that evening for the first cohort of cybersecurity trainees. They had invited Oriana Blackwood as a guest speaker, representing the reformed Neurasync, now operating under a new name and committed to ethical technology development. Several graduates had already received job offers from the company. As Leo Katie drove away from the cemetery, the setting sun cast long shadows across the gravestones of those who had served in silence and sacrifice. Their battles were finished, but hers continued in a different form, no longer in distant countries or classified operations, but in classrooms and veteran centers, in the everyday recognition of dignity and worth in those society too often overlooked. The lesson of Neurasync's fall wasn't that power is fragile, though certainly Thaddeus Mercer had learned that lesson too late. The real lesson was simpler and more profound. Everyone deserves to be seen, to be treated with respect, regardless of their apparent status or utility. In forgetting that fundamental truth, Mercer had inadvertently triggered his own downfall. For Leo Katie Rousseau, former Navy SEAL, intelligence operative, and now teacher, the journey continued, not in the shadows of covert operations, but in the quiet, essential work of helping others find their way forward after service. A different kind of mission, but no less vital. And if occasionally she was recognized as the waitress who brought down a billionaire, she would simply smile and redirect the conversation. After all, it had never been about revenge. It had been about accountability, about standing up for principles that transcended personal injury or insult. That evening, as she prepared to celebrate her students' achievements, Leo Katie felt a sense of purpose clearer than any military objective she had ever pursued. The lessons of her military career, resilience, precision, integrity, now served a new mission, ensuring that those who had served would never be rendered invisible, that their skills and sacrifices would be recognized and valued in civilian life. It was, she reflected, exactly the kind of mission her father and siblings would have understood. Service continued, even when the uniform changed. The battle for recognition and respect never truly ended. It just transformed into new arenas, new challenges, new opportunities to demonstrate what true power and authority should look like.